Hello and welcome to GameSack. Let's take a look at some arcade games as well as their ports to various home consoles. First up is a game that I don't think a lot of people have played, either in the arcade or at home. Here's Phelios from Namco, released to Japanese arcades in 1989. This one's a vertical shooter. You play as a dude named Apollon riding a flying horse whose name is Pegasus. That's right, Apollon. A girl has been kidnapped and you need to rescue her. There's only one button to worry about in this game, and as you can probably imagine, it fires the shots from your sword. If you hold the button down, you can build up a charge shot. You can collect plenty of speed-ups and options which can make things a little better. You'll also occasionally get a very special weapon which is exactly what you need for that particular part of the game. Sadly, it gets taken away once you're done with that part. Thankfully, you can take a few hits before you die. When that happens, you'll get set back to the beginning of the segment you died on, and your weapons reset to the weakest level. It's not that bad though, as you don't feel significantly underpowered like you would in a Gradius game or something like that. The game is still tough though, but it gives you hope, so that means it's still fun. The graphics are excellent for their time. There's lots of scaling and rotation in here as you swoop around, flying high and low. It's awesome. The music is quite nice as well, with some epic as well as some eerie tunes. There are some voices which announce the power-ups as you shoot them, but not as you collect them. This is definitely an interesting shooter that probably would have done well in arcades outside of Japan. In 1990, Phelios came to the Genesis, also from Namco, and it got released in Japan, North America, and even Europe. This arrived on a whopping 4 megabit cartridge. They did a fairly good job considering that and the source material. Unfortunately, the game runs in the Genesis's low resolution mode for whatever reason. Since the arcade game is vertical, Namco created a sword graphic for the charging meter and placed it on the right side of the screen so that the aspect ratio wouldn't have to be compromised too much. All of the scaling and rotation that was in the arcade game was removed from the Genesis version. Well, not all of it actually. The scaling here is present in both versions. Can you tell which one is the Genesis version? Okay, here it is again. Look closely. Which is the Genesis version? Got it? If you picked this one as being the Genesis game, you're a stupid idiot. There are other differences, like the hero being named Apollo now instead of Apollon. Artemis now has slightly smaller boobs, since the Genesis hardware isn't quite as powerful as the arcade. Gameplay-wise, it's mostly the same, with generally the same enemies and enemy placement. However, some of the attacks and even attack patterns have been changed. Fortunately, the enemy attacks are a bit easier to avoid, though the game is absolutely still tough as balls. The voices that announce the power-ups are still here, but they sound much rougher. One interesting addition to the Genesis version is the professional English voice acting during the cutscenes between the levels.
I'm being held in the temple. Save me, quicker!
This was in the arcade when the language is set to Japanese, but not when it's set to English.
Apollo. I still remember. There it goes. Apollo! I still remember.
Overall, this is a compromised but still pretty good port of Phelios for its time and the constraints placed on it. Next up is a game that I didn't even know existed until a couple of viewers suggested it, and I'm glad that they did because I never would have even thought to have played it. And if I did, I wouldn't have known there was an arcade version. I present to you Double Dribble 2. Wait, no, that's not what it's called. This is Run and Gun from Konami, released in 1993. Now, you'd think this would be a run and gun, but no, it's a basketball game. In fact, nobody shoots any guns or gets shot at all in this. The game takes place on a court that has a perspective which scales and moves within a 3D space, though the view can be a bit awkward. Fortunately, player 1's basket is always into the screen and, well, let's face it, player 1 is the player that matters. There are no real teams here as it doesn't have an NBA license, but there are real cities. For example, Seattle is a city in real life. But you can't choose all of the real cities that are in the NBA or anything. Where's Denver? You have a few different shot styles that you can do depending on which button or combination of buttons that you press. On defense, you can also steal the ball and attempt to block shots, which for me doesn't always work very well. I'd like to blame the game's perspective, but I think it's more that I suck at sports games. If you or the CPU make a really great play, you get to watch a replay. These can be skipped if you like. It probably goes without saying that the CPU gets a lot more replays than I do. Three-point shots are very difficult to make. Maybe because back then, three-pointers weren't as common as they are in today's basketball landscape, I don't know. I was still able to make one though, once.
Hey, that's too far.
You play until the end of the quarter, but if you want to play the next quarter, well then I hope you have another quarter because that's when the game asks you to continue. At halftime, you have the opportunity to be entertained by the cheer girls. You can skip it, but why would you? I'm so thirsty. I enjoy how this game looks, despite it being a bit awkward at times. There's a lot of voice, and the music does a lot to keep the energy level high. Overall, despite my personal suckage at it, I find this one quite enjoyable.
Terrible shot. No good. Rebound taken by Salt Lake City. Here comes the tomahawk. 8-point differential for Salt Lake City lead.
In 1995, Konami brought this home to the Super NES as NBA Give and Go. Wow, what a lame title. No wonder I've never even thought about it. But at least that means that there are NBA teams and players in here now. Hell, even the Denver Nuggets are in here. There are also way more modes to play here than just arcade. You can even do a full season. You choose how many games you'd like to play, up to 82. Unfortunately, the game uses a password save. Weirdly, the Japanese version of the game has a battery. What gives, Konami? The gameplay is more or less the same with the same perspective, movement of the court, and all that. However, you can change a lot of options, mainly turning different fouls on or off. It seems a bit easier to steal the ball this time around, and I feel that the defensive game has been tweaked just a bit for the better. Sadly though, the game feels like it's running in slow motion compared to the arcade version, especially when more than one player is jumping in the air for any reason. Graphically, the court looks almost as good as the arcade court, just at a lower frame rate. Still playable though. Even the crowd behind the basket scales in and out as you move. This is a cool feature that not many games do with Mode 7. As expected, you lose the sideline crowd as that's just not in the console's wheelhouse of tricks that it can do. The players aren't scaled by the hardware like they are in the arcade, they're just animated at different sizes. One time when I began a game, my player was super tiny for a fraction of a second. Hey guys, can I play too? There can be a little flicker on the players, but it's certainly not obtrusive. Still, overall, they did well with what they had to work with. The announcer is still here, and I think he sounds even better than the arcade.
Wow, layup! Good shot!
The announcer is unmistakably Michael Gwynn, the same announcer from the original Ridge Racer, and it's fun hearing him here in the 16-bit era.
Alley-oop! Good!
Despite having slower gameplay, I still think this is a great port. Its perspective makes it stand out in the sea of other NBA games in that era, and it's so easy to overlook any title with NBA or the like in it, just like I did back in 1995. Granted, I was playing both the PlayStation and the Saturn by the time this came out, but you get my drift.
From downtown. Oh! Doesn't get it. Oh! Tomahawk! Good! Shoot! Block shot!
Are you getting tired of the Marvel stuff yet? Do you think society is perhaps oversaturated by it? Well, let's go back to a time before it was a multi-quintillion-dollar industry. Here's Captain America and the Avengers from Data East, released in 1991 when Marvel licenses were super cheap. This is a beat-em-up which can be played with up to 4 players simultaneously. You can choose to control Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, or Vision. They all control the same way, but of course their attacks look different. You can attack, you can also jump, and each character has forms of attacking whilst jumping. You can also press attack and jump together for a projectile-style attack. But this isn't instantaneous, and you may receive a beating before you're able to pull it off. You have 5 stages, some of which can be pretty long. A few times you get to play the game as a shooter to freshen things up a bit. The action is quick, and they did a good job making sure that it doesn't become too repetitive. The graphics are kind of a mixed bag. On one hand, the backgrounds are full of color and they look like they were painted. On the other hand, the characters are all very small. It certainly is weird seeing an arcade game with such quaint-looking characters. I mean, look at Juggernaut. He's supposed to be impressively big, but here he's just as tiny as anyone else. The sound and the music are all great though. There are plenty of fun voices. And they're fun because they're so damn nonsensical.
You can't escape! You will be the one escaping!
Okay, that'll show 'em, I guess.
Where is the laser? Ask the police.
The police? How the hell would they know? The music is triumphant and energetic. I love how when you get the boss's life bar down to 25%, the music picks up, giving you hope. All in all, this is a fun one. Captain America and the Avengers came to the NES at the end of 1991. This isn't a port of the arcade. It's a side-scrolling platformer where you play as Captain America and Hawkeye on a quest to save Iron Man and Vision. Same name, different game. Hawkeye can shoot up and diagonally up. Captain America shoots left or right only. You go to stages where you need to find a certain flashing crystal before you can exit. Imagine going to a city in the United States where you can't leave until you find the flashing circle. This one's full of annoying appearing and disappearing platforms. It's not a particularly good game. I figured I'd at least mention this one though. Captain America and the Avengers' first real port was to the Sega Genesis in 1992 from Data East themselves, developed by ISCO and Opera House. This one retains all of the same playable characters, the same moves, and the same stages as the arcade. However, only 2 people can play at the same time in this version. The control is the same, however, the game doesn't feel identical as you play. Moving around feels a bit more loose and fast, and the collision detection definitely has some issues. It's now a bit more difficult to get hits in without being damaged yourself. It actually feels quite sloppy. Adding to this is the fact that the game only runs at 30 frames per second at its maximum and uses the lower resolution of the console. The color and various graphical work is all poorly done. In fact, this part right here is the only spot that I think looks almost decent. The key word in that sentence is almost. The comic drawings between the stages have been replaced with boring text that isn't even centered very well. The music is pretty good though, done by Hitoshi Sakimoto, and it gives the arcade music a run for its money. However, it is all in mono. Even most, if not all, of the voices are in here, though they're very quiet.
You can't escape! You will be the one escaping!
This is clearly a rushed port overall, but at least everything is in here. It came the next year to the Super NES from Mindscape. It was developed by Real Time Associates. At first glance, this certainly looks a lot better than the Genesis game. I mean, there's some actual detail and the colors are decent. But then you start to play it and oh man, it's worse than the Sega version. Much worse. The collision detection here is somehow even less good. You throw a lot of punches and maybe once in a while you'll hit an enemy. The control is mostly the same, but the projectile weapon now has its very own button. This version also loves to have these jumping guys that shoot lasers. I tell you, I don't love them. They're nearly impossible to avoid, so have fun. And they show up a lot. The worst part is that, unlike the arcade and Genesis versions, the enemy is invincible for a bit after you knock them down. Who made this decision? Oh, and why is Vision shooting lasers from his dick? While the graphics are often better than the Sega version, they're still kind of icky. This port also runs at only 30 frames per second and at the same resolution as the Sega game. Lots of animation is missing. Like here, for example, the giant robot only bends his elbow. But as you can see, he has way more movement in the other versions. The sound is also, well, it's disappointing. Most of the voices are gone, but the ones that are here are of good quality.
America still needs your help!
They did change a lot of the dialogue in the text boxes, but that makes it less amusing. The music is definitely inferior to the Genesis version, kind of sounding like a cheap Casio keyboard with the most basic percussion. The boss music no longer changes when you get them down low. This is definitely not a great port. A version also came out on the Game Gear in 1993, again from Mindscape and Real Time Associates. All 4 selectable characters are here amazingly, though the game is now single player only. They also changed it into a single plane beat 'em up. You can't walk up or down in the screen. Each level is now divided up into 5 subsections followed by the stage boss fight. You now have this part here where you jump from ledge to ledge scrolling upwards. Or sometimes you may even need to move downwards. Suffice it to say that the level design has changed a lot here. Since you can't walk up or down, up plus attack is now how you use your projectile weapon. The collision detection is still pretty bad, but are you surprised? The graphics are decent for the Game Gear, and the audio, well, it's the Game Gear, so it's fairly basic. They didn't even bother to make it in stereo. Lazy. In 1994, it came out on the Game Boy. This is basically just like the Game Gear game, though they slightly redesigned it in some spots. Like here in Stage 2, there are no longer gaps in the buildings that you're forced to fall through. They also give you more hearts to collect, which give you an extra continue. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. Oh, except that they decided to make this one as stereo. Take that, Game Gear! Out of all the ports, the Genesis is by far the best, though it certainly has a lot of compromises compared to the original. It definitely has the best audio of any home port, as well as the best gameplay. But don't get me wrong, it could still use a lot of tweaking. I was going to cover Darius Gaiden for this episode. In fact, I even captured the gameplay and wrote the script. But then I thought, maybe I should cover the second game before I covered the third, because it's still quite interesting. So, next time I'll cover Gaiden, but for now, here's part 2. Here's Darius 2 from Taito, or Darius or Darius, however you want to pronounce it. I'm just going to call it Darius. If you don't like that, well, go write a letter to your congressman. The name was changed to Sagaia outside of Japan. This horizontal shooter first came to the arcades in 1989, and it's a much more interesting game than the original.
I always wanted a thing called tuna sashimi.
The action takes place across 2 screens for a super wide view, down from 3 screens that were used in the previous title. You fire a regular shot and drop a missile at the same time, but this firepower increases as you defeat certain enemies and collect power-ups. You can be powered up pretty dang far, but I usually die before it gets too crazy. You can also grab a shield, which is extremely helpful. At least from enemy shots. It won't help you if you run into something. At the end of every stage is a fishy boss, and these guys don't go down easily. The game will automatically turn your ship around if you fly to the other side of the boss. After you beat a boss, you choose your next stage. There are 28 possible stages to play, but you'll only play through 7 of them during a single run. Don't start thinking that this is amazing, because there's actually less variety than it would seem. Lots of the same graphics are used for multiple stages. Gameplay-wise, hey, it's an arcade game and it's designed to eat quarters, so you're gonna die a lot. There's so much going on a lot of the times, and it's often very difficult to avoid taking a hit. Graphically, it's very good, with some really cool stage and enemy designs as well as great use of color. The sound is okay. It has 1 or 2 good musical tracks. The rest of it is your standard Taito mediocrity. The first port was to the Genesis as Sagaia in 1991, late 1990 in Japan. Obviously, this is now a single-screen game, but it's slightly letterboxed as a result. The gameplay is the same, except that here the game has been rebalanced a little, giving you a bit more hope, at least in the first few stages. I can now power myself up a lot more before I start dying. The later stages are still absolutely insane. All 28 zones are here, however, their order has been changed. I went through the same path here as I did on the arcade version and got a few different stages and bosses. Some of the zones are missing some content and there's no flying into and out of each zone anymore. The graphics have taken a noticeable step down, especially in color, but what's here still looks okay for the time. The music sounds a little bit better than the arcade, at least as far as instrumentation is concerned. It's more full and sounds like it's using less primitive hardware. The sound effects, however, are annoying and they don't sound good at all. They really drown out the music. This is certainly not one of the better shooters on the console. It came next to the Game Boy, also as Sagaia, and this one was only released in Japan. This one's more of its own thing, working more like the first Darius game. The stages are mishmash creations mainly from the first game, but still unique to this one. The bosses are from the first game as well as Darius 2. There's no selecting levels here after you defeat a boss, it just goes straight into the next level like a normal shooter. There are 8 zones, and the 4th zone is a boss rush of the ones you've already defeated. Yay! The final stage is another exciting boss rush. Graphically, it's pretty good for the Game Boy, with ever-present parallax scrolling. It even makes good use of the window layer. The music is in full stereo and it sounds mostly good. There's a popular saying out there, and I think the bulk of humanity loves it when other people say it. It fits here, so I'm gonna say the saying, okay? Here goes. It is what it is. Then there's the Master System version called Sagaia, which only came out in Europe. Obviously, this one takes a pretty big step down as it only has 2 megabits of memory, only a quarter of what the Genesis version has. The game only runs at 30 frames per second, which is not good for a shooter. Or, let's be real, any game really. To make things worse, there's so much flicker that it's hard to tell if things are even there or not, or if they're shooting at you. If you can power yourself like I did here, it makes it a ton easier. But be warned, it only takes a small error on your part to bring you back down. I'm surprised how technically impressive this one is given the memory constraints. Most of the levels have some parallax. You can still select your stage, but there are only 12 zones total instead of 28. You still play through 7 rounds though. game showed up next on the PC Engine Super CD as Super Darius 2. One thing that you should know is that the PC Engine takes its Darius games very seriously. This one restores all of the content that was missing from the Genesis game. However, the zone order is still slightly different. The bosses are definitely in a different order. You're pretty zoomed in as you play, but this doesn't hinder the experience at all as the game has been rebalanced for this. Oddly, you do scroll up and down a little bit as if the screen isn't tall enough. I really enjoy the gameplay in this one as it's not so overwhelming. There are some minor but notable differences. Some enemy groups no longer give you bonus points when you take out the entire formation. The Stage 1 boss no longer has a bomb that can take him out, and he only ever appears on the right side of the screen rather than both. An interesting feature though is that when you pause the game and start pressing buttons, it'll run in slow motion, so I guess that can help you out a bit if you need it. The graphics are excellent. All of the detail and color is here. It absolutely blows away the Genesis game. They even managed to throw in plenty of multi-layered scrolling. They did lose some of the effects though, like the waviness of these clouds here in this particular level. What's really cool is that the music is now arranged and for the most part it kicks ass. Actually, now that I remember, I promised one viewer that I'd use the word banger at some point. So I just want to say, the music here is a real banger. Am I one of the cool kids now? No? Not surprised. This is a great port. Darius 2 last showed up on the Saturn in 1996 and only in Japan. This one more or less tries to emulate the arcade exactly with the same stages, zone layout, and all that. You can even play the game letterboxed. But what's more is that by hitting the shoulder buttons, you can zoom the screen into its native resolution, though now you're only seeing half of the screen. When it's all the way zoomed out, you only get a quarter of the arcade's resolution. When you're zoomed in, you can still move your ship around to both screens, and that can be super weird. So zoomed in or zoomed out, each way there is a compromise. But if you want a real challenge, you can try to play while constantly zooming. Whoa! 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 Okay. The music is also slightly arranged with more beefy sounding instruments than the arcade, but nothing close to the PC Engine CD music. Overall, I'd say that if you're going to play a port of the game, play it on the PC Engine Super CD. It's by far the most fun. The Master System definitely has the most jank. That is at least a proper port of the game though, unlike the Game Boy game. And there you go, some arcade games and their respective home ports. So what are your thoughts on these games, and what are some other arcade games you'd like to see me compare to their home ports? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
My dad is just stupid rocket and says you can live without working. If there's something you'd like to know about Oprah, you should go to the Oprah Palace. Well then, what would you like? You have I? Okay, this is Oprah. Here you go, take it. Do you want anything else? There you go, use it or lose it. later, eh? Wow! And the dog! May I help you? Single cock. The stuff has to care for you. Wow! And the dog! Wow! Travel up! Hello! The hideout is the building instead!